Welcome to Genius Vitality's podcast. We take complex source material and we'll try to make sense of it for you. And today we've got a really fascinating one. It's a deep dive into a theory that frankly challenges a lot of standard thinking on aging, health, hormones. Yeah, it's pretty radical. The core idea we're unpacking is that maybe aging isn't about losing hormones like we usually think. The source material suggests it might be driven by too much estrogen, or what it calls estrogen dominance. It flips the whole hormone replacement idea around. Okay, so things like tissues hardening, losing function, general decline. The claim is that chemically, functionally, those processes look identical to what happens with chronic estrogen excess. Wow. Okay, so to get into this, we need to understand what estrogen means here and maybe look at the history of it. Definitely first. Estrogen isn't just one specific molecule in this discussion, right? It's used as a term for a whole class of substances, things that act like estradiol and its metabolites. And the history part. Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Before about, say, the 1940s, the scientific view on estrogen was quite different. Also, it was actually known to have toxic effects, things like causing abnormal blood clots, infertility, even links to cancer. Researchers were pretty cautious. But then something changed. Massively. Around the same time, the drug companies started marketing it heavily. They tapped into this older idea, that aging is just a deficiency. The hormone replacement. And precisely, they branded estrogen as the female hormone essential for youth fertility, completely overshadowing the known risks. So the core argument we're exploring today is that this aging process we observe is essentially the result of this estrogen dominance. The degenerative changes, the fibrosis, the cell aging signs, they mirror the known effects of too much estrogen. And is there evidence for this increase with age? Yeah. The source points to studies showing that as organisms, including humans, get older, you often see higher absolute estrogen levels, or the balance shift. The ratio of estrogen compared to anti-estrogenic hormones like progesterone increases. It's like this estrogen signal gets louder and louder over time. Okay, let's get technical for a moment. How is this supposed to work at the cellular level? The source uses this phrase, oxygen thief. Right? That's the core mechanism proposed. Estrogen interferes with mitochondria, the cell's power plants. How does it steal oxygen? It promotes something called futile redox cycling. Think of it like spinning your wheels. The cell burns oxygen like crazy, but doesn't get the energy payoff. Oxygen is consumed, but it's not efficiently converted into ATP, the cell's energy currency. It's just wasted heat and stress. So the cell is basically suffocating from within, even if there's oxygen around. That's the idea. It's an internal energy crisis. Yeah, and the cell has to adapt. What does that adaptation look like? Not good. It starts producing things like lactic acid, generates a flood of free radicals, lipid peroxidation products, which is like fats going rancid inside the cell. Pretty much it's a highly damaging state. And if this stress, this estrogen signal, is constant, then the organism or the tissue adopts the survival strategy. It shuts down, decreases its demands. This is called parabiosis. Parabiosis, like being not fully alive, sort of. It's a functionally suppressed state. We see parallels in things like clinical depression, learned helplessness in animals. Even social subordination impacts function.
And serotonin is involved here too?
Yes, serotonin is often linked with estrogen and is cited as potentially inducing this kind of functional suppression, like a system-wide break. This is wild. So the hormone often pushed for vitality is actually triggering a kind of internal suffocation and shutdown, according to this theory. Chronic stimulation, whether it's from estrogen or even something like, say, chronic irritation from soot, it causes inflammation, swelling, maybe rapid cell division initially, but eventually it leads to tissue breakdown, atrophy, or potentially cancer. It's driven by this energy failure. Can we see this play out on a larger scale? The source mentions infertility. It's used as a powerful example. In some cases of infertility linked to estrogen excess, the uterus itself becomes hyperstimulated, meaning it starts consuming oxygen, so frantically, almost like it's inflamed, that it effectively starves a newly implanted embryo. Wow! The environment becomes hostile. And this failure to sustain the embryo is presented as analogous to how tissues across the body, heart, muscle, brain, lose function during aging. It's the same pattern of resourced reign and failure. And this connects to body composition changes with age, like losing muscle mass, the loss of fat-free mass. FFM seems to follow the same path. Glycogen stores get depleted by these futile energy cycles. Wasted effort. Then protein synthesis gets inhibited and free radicals build up. It's like the body's being signaled to sacrifice its active energy-hungry tissues. So, how does this internal mass translate to what we actually see as aging wrinkles, stiffness? Well, one major area is connective tissue. Collagen specifically, both aging and estrogen excess are linked to collagen becoming harder, contracting. The source uses this vivid analogy. The pork chop. Yeah, the curling pork chop. When it cooks, the idea is that stress and energy deficit cause the collagen fibers to shrink and stiffen. So wrinkles and stiffness might literally be tissues contracting under stress. That's the implication. You see that kind of tissue contraction in, say, the eyelids of some very elderly people. And crucially, this hardening affects blood vessels, making them narrower and stiffer, which is a huge factor in cardiovascular issues. But wait, isn't estrogen often promoted for relaxing blood vessels, helping circulation, usually involving nitric oxide? Ah yes, the circulation paradox, that's the common narrative, often highlighted in drug promotion, relaxing vessels via nitric oxide. But this source disagrees. Strongly. It argues nitric oxide isn't just a relaxant, it's actually a toxic free radical, and it plays a role in degenerative diseases like atherosclerosis itself. So the relaxation might be a short-term effect, or even part of an inflammatory response. Potentially. And the source argues that just measuring increased blood velocity in large arteries doesn't mean better circulation overall. Why not? Because if the smaller vessels deep in the tissues are constricted due to this energy crisis, faster flow in the big pipes might just indicate resistance, not better delivery where it counts. Okay, is there a contrast here with progesterone? Yes. Studies are cited, like one by Dickey and Hauer, suggesting that while estrogen can decrease oxygen availability and flow volume in tissues, progesterone does the opposite. It seems to actually increase blood flow volume into the tissues. It supports circulation differently, more supportive, less like a stress response. This estrogen effect, this stress, does it link to the whole body's response? It does. The source connects it directly to the classic shock reaction described by Hans Selye. Shock. How does estrogen mimic shock? In two key ways. First, water moves out of the blood and into the tissues, causing swelling, edema. Okay. Second, the veins lose tone. They become slack and blood tends to pool in the extremities instead of returning efficiently to the heart. And we see the results of that pooling. Absolutely. Things like varicose veins or that dizziness when standing up quickly. Orthostatic hypotension, very common in older adults and also linked to estrogen access. The body is effectively stuck in a low-volume, sluggish, shock-like state. Let's apply this to bone health. Usually we blame estrogen loss for osteoporosis. Right? That's the standard view, but this source points out something interesting. Most bone loss happens at night. Okay. And what's happening at night? Cortisol, the main stress hormone, is typically highest then, and progesterone is usually at its lowest point. But estrogen levels might still be relatively high, especially compared to progesterone and growth hormone too. So if high estrogen was truly the main protector, why would bone loss accelerate during that period? It raises questions. So what is protective then, according to this view? The argument leans towards progesterone because progesterone helps maintain glycogen stores, our readily available energy reserves, which we need for metabolism, especially overnight. Yes, good energy availability helps buffer the stress response. So the idea is that progesterone, by supporting energy and opposing that shock state, might be the crucial factor for protecting bone. This really reframes the whole hormone picture, which brings us to the science itself. The source is quite critical of the research landscape, isn't it? Extremely critical, huh? It claims the overwhelming consensus praising estrogen's benefits for the brain, heart, etc., might be heavily skewed by who funds the research. They make a comparison to the tobacco industry's tactics. It's a very strong claim suggesting a potential manufacturing of consensus. How would that work? Any specific examples? Given. One mentioned is model switching. Apparently, early studies using dogs for contraceptive safety showed serious problems, cancer-degenerative diseases. The industry largely shifted away from dogs to using short-lived rodents, like rats, because they often die before the long-term chronic degenerative changes. The things that look like aging become obvious. Yeah, this can lead to results that look much safer or more beneficial than they might be in a longer-lived species. It's about controlling the context and manipulating facts too. The source cites examples where basic biological descriptions seem misrepresented in publications, like describing the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle in a way that's roughly the opposite of the actual situation regarding hormone levels, which obviously undermines any conclusions built on that premise. The takeaway for you, the listener, is perhaps to approach even widely accepted claims in this area with a critical eye. Consider the possibility of bias. Okay, so if we accept this premise, aging is estrogen dominance, a kind of chronic stress and oxygen deprivation state, what's the alternative strategy? It can't be simple replacement. No, the strategy shifts completely. It becomes anti-estrogenic and focused on reducing stress and improving energy metabolism. And progesterone plays a key role. It's highlighted as maybe the most important anti-estrogenic hormone. The source calls it perfect in this role. Why perfect? What does it do? Its main job is boosting oxidative efficiency, helping cells use oxygen correctly to make energy, directly countering that oxygen theft, and it protects tissues. Yes, it helps protect against atrophy, and it also opposes angiogenesis. That's the growth of new blood vessels. Wait, isn't angiogenesis usually seen as good repairing tissues? In some contexts, yes. But in this estrogen-dominant low-oxygen state, the new vessels are often leaky and inefficient. It's like a desperate attempt to get more oxygen that doesn't really solve the underlying energy problem. Progesterone helps calm that inflammatory drive. Makes sense. What about practical things? Diet, especially thinking about that nighttime stress peak. Since that inflammatory shock-like state intensifies in darkness when cortisol rises, the source suggests actively managing it, specifically using sugar and salt at night. Sugar and salt. That goes against a lot of standard advice. It does sound counterintuitive, but the reasoning is specific to countering shock. Simple sugars provide quick, clean energy to fight the energy deficit and the salt. Salt helps maintain blood volume. It pulls water back into circulation, counteracting the edema and blood pooling of the shock state. It keeps things flowing. The idea is to minimize that nighttime stress response. Okay, and thyroid hormone fits in here too. Yes, thyroid is important for maintaining adequate carbon dioxide, CO2. Why is CO2 important? CO2 itself acts as a vasodilator. It helps relax blood vessels, opposing the constriction that happens under stress as part of efficient energy metabolism. So the whole picture shifts. Aging isn't just a clock running down. It's presented more as a dynamic process, interaction between stressors like estrogen dominance and the body's energy systems, and potentially something we can influence by managing those factors. This has been, well, a really deep dive. It forces a complete rethink if aging processes are fundamentally linked to estrogen dominance in this chronic oxygen-deprived stress state. Then the focus really has to shift away from simple replacement towards optimizing cellular energy, actively countering estrogenic effects, and managing that systemic stress load. It's a huge paradigm shift. And the source leaves us with one last, really provocative idea to chew on. It connects back to that concept of sacrificing the individual for the species. Like the embryo analogy, sort of, but on a bigger scale. It mentions studies where removing the pituitary gland drastically extended lifespan in some animals, suggesting hormones from there might drive aging. And it brings up organisms like the octopus, where the ovary literally produces a self-destruct hormone after reproduction. A programmed death signal. So the final question posed is if there's this deep biological programming for self-sacrifice, which chemically looks a lot like this catabolic estrogen-dominant state, then what? Could it be that many of the stressors we encounter daily, environmental toxins, poor diet, chronic psychological stress, are hijacking that ancient pathway? Are they acting like that estrogenic sacrifice signal, pushing our bodies towards breakdown prematurely? Wow, that's definitely something to think about long after this episode ends. Indeed, a lot to consider.